Hi, my name is Gio, and I'm an org advisor at the University of California, Riverside. And we're here to talk about how to create a budget. Before we begin, we need to talk about what a budget is. Basically, a budget tells you how much money you think or know will be coming in and out of your budget. There are two components: income, which is where you're getting your money from, and expenses, where your money is going. We need to also talk about club goals briefly. You should really have your goals figured out before you start creating your budget. These goals will help you put your budget together. They will help you figure out what your priorities are as a club and what your expenses will be. Does it cost money to accomplish your goals? If it does, how much? We need to figure out how much money it will cost to accomplish each goal so that you can create your budget that fits the needs of your club. There are many categories of expenses: advance, food, supplies, professional development, t-shirts, other possible expenses. Which of these expenses are things that you will include in your club's budget, depending on what your club's priorities are? For the purposes of this video, we are going to create a hypothetical club called the Checkers Club, and they're going to have two goals that are priorities and one that is not. So the one that is not a priority does not help accomplish the goals of the club or the purpose of the club. It's just something they want to do. These two priorities are hosting a tournament and hosting an end of the year banquet. Having t-shirts made does not help the club's purpose per se, but it is something nice to have. At this point, please see the description below and download the sample budget that I have created for you to follow along with this video. First, we need to talk about projecting expenses. Once you have a good idea of what it will cost to accomplish your goals as a club, we need to project those numbers as expenses. Expenses are everything that your club spends, from small amounts to large amounts. Don't forget your operating costs. Those are the costs surrounding each individual event. Here's a sample of what our pretend club might have projected to spend for the year based on the goals they set earlier. So in winter and spring, they want to hold tournaments, and that's at the cost of $600 according to what their research has shown. They want to have a banquet, and that looks like it'll cost $400 at the end of the year. They also want to have printing made for various reasons, maybe, and that'll be $100. They've set aside, or projected, I should say, $300 in supplies. They've projected to spend $325 in room reservations and $200 in shirts. Let's plug those numbers in. So those numbers would go here under expenses and projected. And you can see all of those numbers have been lined up. And at the very bottom is a total of what they project to expend for the year, or what their total costs for the year will be. We need to briefly talk about income as well. Income is where your money is coming from to pay for your expenses. Here I've listed several income sources where you can find possible income. ASUCR is one. Fundraising, co-sponsorships, grants, donations, so on and so forth. Are there other possible income sources that are not listed here? Also, it's the responsibility of all officers to help contribute to finding these income sources, or to help getting income from some of these sources. There's a lot of places to get money from, and it can be a lot of work for the treasurer alone. Possible income. How much money do you think you can make from different individual funding sources? Right here, we're really going to talk about reliable sources. What is the easiest place to get money from? ASUCR is a pretty reliable source. If you have members that pay dues regularly, that could be a reliable source. Do you have reliable fundraisers that your club has done in the past? Something that is very reliable for your organization, we need to classify as a reliable income source for you, and that could be different from club to club. Continuing this thought, which funding sources are less reliable, right? But could be a good source of money if you want to do the work for it. maybe requesting donations or sponsorships. Some fundraisers could be a lot of work, but could pay off, but also could not pay off. Maybe figure out what other organizations are doing to earn money in some of these areas. Now we're going to project some income for our Checkers Club. So they are on their second year with ASUCR, requesting money from ASUCR, and they're getting $825. They're asking for $25 in dues from each individual member, and they're projecting to have 25 total members, so that comes to $625. They're projecting to be able to raise $300 from fundraisers, so they need to figure out how many fundraisers they're having and what kind of fundraisers. And they also are looking at getting a co-sponsorship for $200 for shirts from ASPV. So we're going to go ahead and plug those numbers in, and they would go right here in the projected income section. And at the very bottom, it tells you the total of what projected income they're going to make. And it says $1,950. Okay, now we need to talk about prioritizing our expenses. Right, the most reliable funding sources need to fund your club's top priorities. This club's top priorities are hosting 2 tournaments and the end of the year banquet. So in this case, everything that is around or revolving around the tournament and the banquets need to receive the highest priority from the budget, which means that they need to be funded from the most reliable sources so that those events can happen. This would include printing and room reservations in this case. Printing, because it looks like they're going to probably advertise using some form of printing for their tournament. And room reservations, because you can't host an event without a room. Looks like they're going to hold their events on campus. So which of these sources is the most reliable for what they're doing? ASUCR and their dues in this case. So we'll label those down there, and they're labeled in red. Right? Winter and spring tournaments are coming from their dues. ASUCR is funding their spring banquet, printing, and room reservations. Now we're briefly going to move and talk about the ASUCR budget form. If you look at the description below, you'll be able to find the ASUCR budget form, the link for it. With this form, you're letting ASUCR know how you plan to spend the money your club is asking for. Your club will receive a 10% increase every year if your club's proposed budget is approved. ASUCR has limits on certain expense categories. The PDF outlining these limits can be found on ASUCR's website. I also have it in this PowerPoint in a little bit. Think about what campus services your club will use and have those expenses be paid for from this fund. ASUCR can be billed directly. So those services can bill your account directly, I should say. Here's a sample of what that budget form looks like from ASUCR. We're going to look at how the Checkers Club may have filled this out based on our line items from our budget that we're working with. For this example, this will be the second year that the Checkers Club will be asking for money from ASUCR, so they'll be receiving $825. How many members does the Checkers Club have? The account number that it's asking for is assigned to your club once your club activates an account with ASUCR. And what were the expenses to be paid for from this fund? The banquet for $400, printing for $100, and room reservations for $325. Here is the form filled in. They filled in their name, their account number, the number of members that they have, the amount they will be receiving from ASUCR, and what they would like to spend their money on. A few notes. Your club must attend a budget hearing held by ASUCR to have your proposed budget approved. Is this proposed budget exceeding any category limits? If your budget is purchasing goods and services outside of UCR, someone will need to pay out of pocket and request a reimbursement from ASUCR. Or if that business is on the approved vendor list at UCR, you could request a purchase order from ASUCR. For any questions regarding ASUCR, please visit their website. And as I said before, these are the expense limits on what they will pay for normally. This year they've changed that and have made updates due to COVID-19 on what those expense limits are. And both of these forms can be found on ASUCR's website. Now we're going to jump back to our budget form that we had originally started working with. Receiving income. Document in your budget any income your club receives. What source did it come from? These numbers need to go into your income section under actual, because they are actual real dollars that you have received and are able to spend. They are no longer pending. In this example, we're going to jump to a mid-fall example. So ASUCR approved $825 for them to spend. 24 of their 25 members have paid dues, and they've held one fundraiser totaling in $90. So let's plug these numbers in to see what it looks like. And those numbers would go right there. Okay, so it looks like we have $1,515 to actually spend, which is pretty good for fall. So we need to talk a little bit about pending income. Pending income is projected income that your club has not yet raised or have access to. Money you still need to raise based on what your club projected. For example, the Checkers Club has gained access to $825 of ASUCR funding, so they have zero pending income in that income source. They have not received the co-sponsorship from ASPB, so they still have $200 pending in that income source. One person still needs to pay their dues, so that's $25 pending. And they've only had one fundraiser that has raised $90, so they still have pending income to raise of $210. Here's what that looks like with the money filled in. I should say the numbers filled in. And so they have $435 still pending to raise. Now we're going to talk a little bit about spending money. Once your club starts spending money, you will need to update the expenses sheet of your budget to reflect club spending. So we're going to continue with the same example, but we're going to move to midwinter, and some expenses have been made or some spending has happened, right? So it looks like they have spent $300 on their first tournament, $52 on printing, $72 on supplies, and $112 on room reservations. So we're going to plug those expenses in. They would go right here under expenses in actual, because it's actual real dollars that they've spent. They spent $300 on their winter tournament and $52 in printing, $72 on supplies, and $112 from their room reservations. Now we're going to talk about pending expenses in the actual column. Pending expenses are expenses that have not yet happened, but pending expenses in the actual column are expenses that have not happened, but are based on the actual real dollars you have received that you actually have access to. So let's go through the example here. The same example in midwinter. They've spent $300 on their winter tournament, so they have a pending expenses of $0. This event has happened and all the money was used. They spent $0 on their spring tournament, so they have $300 actual dollars still pending to use that are real, and they have access to that money, but the event hasn't happened yet. The same thing with the spring banquet. The money is there, and it's real dollars that they have available, but they have not spent it, so it's still pending expense. Continuing on, they've spent $52 on printing, and they have $48 left in real dollars, actual dollars, that are pending to spend. They had $100 to start. Here's where it might get a little tricky. They spent $72 in supplies with 18 actual dollars left that are still pending. Remember, this is based on real dollars we have available. They have not fundraised all $300 they projected. They can only use the money they actually have. they've spent $112 on room reservations, and they should have $213 pending to spend in that area. They did not receive the $200 co-sponsorship, so there are 0 actual dollars available in this area. This means they have 0 pending to spend because they have 0 actual real dollars available in this area. So let's plug those numbers in. And that would go here. So as you can see, everything is pretty straightforward until you get to the supplies area, where they have projected $300, they've spent $72, and have pending 18, because it's based on the amount of actual dollars that they have raised. And they have actually raised $90 total. So you take the number that they spent and you subtract that number from the actual dollars they have, and you come to a total of $18. Actual real dollars pending to spend. Pending expenses. Projected. So these are expenses you projected that have not happened, and it's based on your projected expenses and the real expenses you've completed. So let's go through the example here. This club, the Checkers Club, projected to spend $300 on their winter tournament and have spent that amount. So they have projected pending expense. Sorry, they have a pending expense that is projected of $0 because that event happened and the dollars were spent. Simple. The next area, the spring tournament, they have projected $300 to spend, but it hasn't happened, and the money is actually there, and they projected to spend it, but they have not spent it yet. So they still have $300 projected to spend in this area. Same thing with the spring banquet. The event hasn't happened, so the $400 are still there and are projected to be spent in the future. For printing, we projected to spend $100. We've spent $52, and we still have $48 to spend. So when we come to supplies, they projected to spend $300 in supplies. They spent $72. This means that they have $228 projected to spend. But their actual income that they have left is $18 because they have not received all of the projected funds from this fundraising. So you take the amount you project and you subtract the amount you have spent, and that'll give you your total. So they projected $300, they've spent $72, and they have $228 projected to spend in this area. In the next area, they projected to spend $325 in room reservations. They have spent $112 and still have $213 projected to spend. They projected to spend $200 on t-shirts. They have not spent any of this money because they didn't receive any funding in this area. This means we still have $200 projected, but to spend we have $0, 0 real dollars, actual dollars, because we did not receive the funding in this area. At this point, you may consider removing this item from the budget since we're not getting the funding for it. And here's what that looks like when we fill it in. There. So as you can see, everything's pretty straightforward until we come to the supply section again. When we look at the $228 that we're projecting that is to spend in this area is different than the actual dollars we have available. Things to consider. You should make updates to this, to your budget, I should say, as needed throughout the year. Your situation can change as the year goes along, and it would be good to make updates as needed. Your budget should never be set in stone. Also, consider creating your own budget that makes sense to you, or find one online that works for you. Remember to try to keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate something. If you need any help or have any questions, feel free to email us at ucrlife@ucr.edu. Thank you very much for watching.